First of all, thank you very much for coming. It's been only, I think, 3.5 weeks that Fritzi met you in Austin, right? And 3.5 weeks later, you're here already at the podcast. So fast, so dynamic. Thank you for that.
Thank you for having me, yes.
To the listeners and the watchers, you should feel the energy that Frederik is giving here into the room and to me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, yes.
And maybe let's start with a quite easy question. Or maybe not so easy question. In retrospective, probably an easy question. How did your journey start from being in Germany, finishing your PhD, and then moving all into the innovation space and to the United States of America? Can you give us some insights?
Yes, I think one of the maybe interesting moments was when I finished my PhD and or was still in the process of finishing my PhD, and I wanted to get some new insights and felt that I want to go somewhere else to continue my research, and I applied, I think, at 86 or 87 universities in the US. None of those universities accepted me. Only Stanford.
Wow.
Only Stanford accepted me and said, like, yeah, I think your topic is interesting and the question you were asking is very interesting. Because at that time I was researching how we can use technology to really reimagine education, right? And back in those days, Web 2.0 and like podcasting and wikis and weblogs were just emerging, right? And so I felt that these are very creative tools that students could use to learn and grow, right? Not as tools to consume information, but to create, right? And I think the other universities just felt like that's maybe too far ahead, right? That's too far into the future. And Stanford really said yes to that question and how we can reimagine education with technology. And so I went into I went on the plane with my little backpack, and I lived in a small apartment with an elderly lady.
Wow.
And I took the bus to Stanford every morning, right, from Mountain View to Stanford. It's a street called the El Camino Real, which is quite famous because the Spanish were using that as a path basically throughout California with their missions. So I took the bus every morning, and you had to have exactly $1.50 in change, so in 25-cent coins, because the bus was not accepting anything else. So I put the money in the machine every morning, went on the bus, and then something interesting happened, because every time I took the bus back every evening, the same people were still on the bus. And so I felt like, how could that be, right? And I talked to those people, and I tried to understand who these people are and so forth, and it was all homeless, right? Because
wow.
they spent also the $1.50, but they stayed up to, I think it's 48 hours in the bus, because it was warm, right? They had other people.
Safe place.
It's a safe place, exactly. And so this was my first lesson in empathy, right? Understanding these people, where they come from, what drives them, what does their world look like, and so forth. What problems do they face? And so a couple of months later, I offered the first class teaching empathy to Stanford students, right? Because that for me is something truly valuable and helpful if you want to build better solutions, right? You have to put yourself into other people's literally shoes, or into other people's perspectives, to really understand how they see the world, what problems are they facing, and so forth, to then build solutions that are meaningful, that have impact, and so forth. And that was a very popular class. And I continued on my journey and taught other classes on navigating ambiguity and uncertainty, on how to just become a better innovator in this world, right? Where innovation for me doesn't start with an idea, right? It starts with the person. It starts with people, right? And how people grow in imagination, in expansive thinking, in experimentation, in curiosity, in empathy, all of those are the necessary skills I think people need to really create meaningful innovations in the world.
I couldn't agree more, actually. I've discussed with Professor David Balkin from the Boulder University. I discussed with him about trust and about empathy. And I think empathy to me is a subset of social intelligence, kind of. And so he really opened my eyes back then that empathy can be learned by anyone. Could you maybe share us some kind of little tools, some little hacks, people who are aware that they maybe lack a little bit of empathy, that they cannot really understand other people, how they can get out of that? How can they learn to be more empathetic?
Yes, there's a very simple but powerful way, which is just listen more, right? I think listening is one of the first steps to understand people better. I think listening is a skill that you can continue to grow and develop, right? Like deeply listening, right? What other people are saying, and then asking better questions. And one of the classes that I offered in combination with my work at Google, so we had Stanford students, some Google colleagues, when we went to the Fremont School of the Blind and Deaf to really understand how blind and deaf people, right, navigate the world, right, especially using technology. And so we opened the class making probably like a lot of mistakes, even in our language, right, where we, when we ended the class, we say like, okay, see you tomorrow, right? But see you tomorrow is for a blind person, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like something that we haven't thought of, right? And so that was a big mistake. And then you cannot use any, obviously, slides or any other materials, right? So it was really interesting as a teacher and a professor to understand how other people navigate the world. And so we started the class with doing breakfast together. So blind people, deaf people, and students and some colleagues from Google, right, all together, trying to have that breakfast together, right, where the blind people really were able to navigate, right, because they were like, tasting, they were like, asking questions and so forth. And for some of the students, it was challenging because we blindfolded them. And so, they couldn't see what they were eating, right? So they were quite hesitant. And we ended up finding solutions to that problem, how we can help everybody to navigate the world better afterwards by, creating the first prototypes of that speech to text recognition, right? Where we all use that at the moment, right? We talk to our phones, we talk to our computers, and then text emerges, right? At that time, that was quite a new and novel idea, and that notion of ambient computing and so forth. It all starts with empathy, right? It all starts by understanding people more deeply and then imagining how a better world could look like.
It's incredible. And it's a lot also about perception, right? About getting the details, about understanding the details, about using the empathy to understand the details from the other side, from the other person, and then applying it to your own decisions and thought processes. It's really interesting. So another question in that direction would be like, if you look back over the years, how's your view on how innovation changed over the last few years? Because you were in the middle of it, you saw the transition over a large amount of time. How did it change from you starting with that idea to learn or to research about education?
What I think is interesting, at least for me, is that for me, innovation was never about products, right? It was always about people and how we can help people to develop that capacity to innovate, right? How they can train themselves to become better listeners, to be more empathetic, to imagine better, to experiment more, or even to have more courage, right? All things that you can learn and develop and grow. And it's not easy though, right? I don't see a lot of curricula out there in the universities or at schools that teach you empathy, that teach you like curiosity, that teach you imagination, or even courage, right? So that is part of my mission, is to change that, to really build education offerings that allow you to develop your inner capacity to innovate and then eventually change the outside world, right, for the better. And I think that's something really, really hopefully helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, I really can imagine that. But I already told you before, we were talking a little bit about it, and I did a trip through the United States as well after my school. And so I was with a French guy. I met him in Seattle. He had a van. We took the trip down to California, and I was always a huge fan of Google. So one stop had to be the HQ of Google. So we went up there, parked the van, got out of the van. We're in the HQ area. It's huge, right? And a security guy came towards us, and we were thought, oh, I think we have to leave now. That's going to be horrible. The opposite happened. He came up to us and asked us what we were doing, where we were coming from. He gave us a whole tour through the Google campus, introduced us to a few engineers so we could talk to them. It was so interesting to see such a different culture, such a different culture of an organization, but also that innovativeness, that openness, that curiosity. How do you manage to start such kind of culture on an organizational level? Like, I think it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, it's fascinating that culture is something that can be really tangible, right? You can feel it, you can see it, you can experience it, right? Like your experience with a security guard, which usually tells you like here and not further, right? Or like stop, you're not allowed here, right? The opposite happened, right? You're welcomed, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the parts of a culture where really you see that a culture is working, right? It's bringing those values to life that they want to live by, right? Like openness, transparency, a culture of
Goodwill, maybe?
I wouldn't say goodwill, but like always strive to be better, right? And do good things in the world. That kind of culture, you see that is lived by every individual, like a security guard, right? Like a receptionist, like the people working in the offices, right? The leadership, like everybody is basically bringing those values to life. And that was something fascinating that I was trying to bring to a lot of organizations as well, like the United Nations or the German Soccer Association or other startups, because I feel like whenever I went into these organizations, right, the values were very clearly written on the walls or posters or T-shirts.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I ask these organizations, so how do you bring those values to life? Like, how can I experience those values? You know, usually there was not a response. There was no answer, no idea. And so I helped to create rituals that allowed these organizations to really bring their values to life. And one of the rituals at Google that also is that welcoming, that openness value is whenever you start as a new employee, right, you are allowed to wear a propeller hat, right, and for the first couple of weeks, which is a way to signal to all the other employees that you're new, right? You have a lot of questions, but you're also a fun person, right? And the second thing is you're invited to a gathering called TGIF, Thank Google It's Friday, where Larry Page and Sergey Brin used to, at least during my 12 and a half years at Google, used to answer questions for 1.5 hours every Friday.
Wow.
And I have never seen, I think there was one occasion where Sergey was not present because I think he was sick or something personal happened. All the other times, in 12 and a half years, they were present every single Friday.
Wow.
And the propeller head people, the new employees called the nooglers, sat in the first row, and they were giving the microphone first to ask questions to the founders, right? And I think that's a level of transparency and openness that I haven't experienced in any other place, right? But it's something that doesn't cost you anything, right? Because you just show up and you answer questions as a leadership team. And it activates the value that you want to see happening in that organization, which is openness, right? That openness leads to collaboration, right? Because then if you ask an interesting question, right, and maybe I have the same question on my mind, right, I might approach you afterwards and say like, hey, maybe let's find an answer together, right? Which is very powerful in a culture, because then you're not just open as an organization, you're also collaborative, right? And then, you can all bring these different values to life in ways that is very, very creative. And so one of the rituals that I introduced at Google was the Penguin Award, right? Because I saw that less and less teams were taking risks. Happens in every organization. And so I introduced a little Penguin Award, which was given to the person who took a risk, right? Tried a new approach, a new technology, a new process, whatever it is. At the beginning of the project, they received the Penguin with a little note, thank you for taking a risk, and, giving a little bit of an explanation to the rest of the team what they've tried and what they learn. And so this is a way to recognize people for taking a risk, because taking a risk is not easy, right? You have to get off autopilot. You have to try something new, and it requires energy in your mind, right?
It's the hard part, actually.
Absolutely.
Not taking the risk is the easiest thing ever, because someone tells you what to do. You know the risk management assessment, basically, and if something fails, you can always point to the risk management or the risk system framework that was created.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take the risk on your own, it's you.
Absolutely, yes.
It's on you, one individual.
Yes. So you can really create these rituals, right, in an organization based on the values that you have as an organization. I think everybody can do that, right? Because that creates culture.
What's behind the penguin? I really want to know that. So there's got to be a story behind it.
Yes. I think you love the story, because I used to teach a class on prototyping experimentation on a ship called the Entrepreneur Ship. I didn't make up this, I didn't come up with that name, but I think it's quite brilliant, right? The Entrepreneurship, which was basically sailing to the end of the world. So we had 60 students from Stanford University, we had 40 students from Chile, and 100 students on a big ship for 10 days, where we were teaching things on imagination, on experimentation, prototyping, all related to innovation, right? And one day we observed penguins, right, on an ice shelf. And it's fascinating, because if you watch closely, there's always one penguin that jumps first into the water. It's the courageous penguin.
Sure.
The rest of the colony waits patiently to see if that penguin picks up some food or becomes food, right?
Yeah,
50% chance. Exactly, yes. And so that reminded me that nature is giving us such a great metaphor for our organizations, because in our organizations, there's always a courageous person, a courageous penguin that jumps first into the water, right? Taking a risk, not knowing what they will find, right? But that really led to that Penguin Award, because I felt it's such a great metaphor. If the whole colony is waiting on that ice shelf, right, and no one jumps into the water anymore, that colony dies, right? And it's the same with an organization. The organization will eventually die and not be existent anymore if nobody takes a risk.
It's the innovation dilemma that so famously was written down by Christensen, right? It's so interesting that you applied this kind of ritual within the organization. Do you have some other aspects in mind that an AI startup founder right now could already think of? Because I think it's easier to implement things like this if you're at the beginning than if there's already things existing and there is already a culture, right? So if you live it from the start, it's easier to get it inside of the organizational culture.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the number one question that should be on a startup founder's mind, right? It's like, how can I create a culture that really allows people to innovate, to experiment, to imagine, right? And then creating rituals around that. As you said perfectly, in a startup, you don't have any legacy. You don't have any bureaucracy yet. You don't have any, structures or processes that are established, right? The only thing that you have, and that's an advantage, is your curiosity, right? You're curious, like, if your product, your technology will be successful. You're curious in how you can solve a problem in the world. And that curiosity is something that unfortunately goes dormant in larger organizations when they grow up, right? And the same is true for us humans, right? It goes dormant, our curiosity, when we grow up, right? But it doesn't have to be the way. It can be different, because you can bring back your curiosity and focus on purely asking better questions and experiment more and really trying to push the boundaries as well. And I'm always reminded, I'm a sailor as well, and so are my kids and my wife. And so think back in the days, right, the 1600, right, when sailors were faced with those maps, and on those edges of those maps were sea monsters, right? Dragons, exactly, because it signaled that here is the land of the unknown.
Danger.
Here's danger, right? Don't go there.
Yeah.
Nobody has been there.
Yeah.
Right? And the common knowledge back then was like the earth is flat and you will fall off with your sailboat if you go beyond kind of like the dragons and the monsters, if you make it. Or you're going to be eaten by the monsters and the dragons, right? And some courageous sailors, with their curiosity, asking, what if I sail to the end of the world, to the end of the known? What they discovered was new land, right? And I think in our times today, where we see that technology always has the better answer, it's upon us to ask the better question and be courageously, literally sailing to the end of the unknown.
Yeah. Of all of what we've been talking about right now, I think a central point to that is also trust. I think, like, I think you have to trust. You have to give trust to other people always in a startup, and for example, a venture like that. But they gotta give trust in you as well. I think to be able to really trust in other persons, you gotta be able to trust in yourself, to know yourself, like, to be aware of yourself, to be able to trust in other persons, right?
Absolutely.
For startups also, that's one of the most important things. Like, how do you establish a common culture of trust and about curiosity and openness? Are there some kind of tasks you can do, or rituals, as you said?
You know, all of these things, they start with little practices in your life, right? And you are absolutely right. If you start to understand and be more aware of like how you trust yourself, right? Then you can start to maybe trust others even more. And how do you walk through a day in the world, right? Do you trust everybody or you don't, right? And I always give people 100% trust whenever I meet, a stranger or somebody I haven't met. There's always 100% trust I start with, right? And
I felt that already when you came in.
yes, and I think that's not true for everyone, right? Even in organizations, right? People don't trust you with their ideas, with their resources, whatever it is, right? But I think for me, I always experience that other people trust me as well, right? And so I can fully give that back. And at Google, trust was established through different mechanisms. I think having open calendars, right, for example, or having open door policies or open goals that you define for yourselves, OKRs, that everybody has access to, right? Those are three things that really help you to trust each other, right? Because then I can see like what you're working on, right? Who you're meeting with, when I see your calendar and so forth, which is a level of trust that might feel uncomfortable in the first place, but it really leads to collaboration and a whole trusting organization, right?
Of course. I think trust, there's a word that describes trust to me, to my personal perception, the best, and it's vulnerability. Because if you trust in someone, you're vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Because if it fails, it goes back to you, and you might be in a worse situation than before. So now I made the connection to the penguin, actually, because that takes away some of that risk. It makes it easier to go out there, trust in each other's, and dive into the risk. Because in the end, like, you have a small little shell that is the penguin that is standing on your desk that acknowledges that you was risky and that it isn't something bad.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's the little things that you can practice in your own life, right? Where trust someone by asking them a question, or trust someone by not building bigger walls or bigger fences or whatever it is, but like at least, reduce those and have a little bit more openness, right, towards sharing your ideas as well,
Yeah.
sharing how you feel, right? Sharing your questions, right? And I think that act of sharing creates already trust. And it's something powerful because Amy Edmondson used to coin that terminology around psychological safety, right? Where we at Google used the research Amy has done to really trying to understand what makes a team innovative, productive, and successful. All those teams that we want to work with or within, compared to a team that is not so innovative, not so productive, not so successful. And we studied 200 teams over the course of about 18 months. And what we found was that it's not that if you only put the superstars, right, the A students or the high performers into a team, that you get high performing or superstar or innovative results. It's not the case. Also, what we found is if you throw a lot of resources at that team, right, you give them a big budget, right, that will lead to innovative and productive and successful team. Also not the case. We also found that it's not a location as well. It's not that they have to sit very tight together that produces these innovative and successful results in a team. What we found was fascinating. It's a matter of psychological safety. And exactly what you described, it's about being vulnerable with each other, right? Asking good questions, having a level of trust that is very high, right? Yeah. So that you can take risks and you can, share what you've learned with each other. And I think that is fascinating because every leader in an organization, every individual in an organization can contribute to build those psychological safer teams, which lead to more innovative, more productive, more successful results. And so that's a way of looking at innovation as well, where you don't start with an idea, you don't start with investments, you start with trying to understand how you can create more psychological safety in your organization.
Because the collision of perceptions is innovation, and the collision of perceptions can only happen in that kind of space.
Exactly.
So interesting. I love it that you say it, that you've mentioned it actually, because like this was a little bit our plan for the future for the teams, for the AI teams. We wanted to create some kind of event where they meet, where we are not part of the event, where they can go down to that base layer of trust. So they have like a whole group of people who are in a similar situation they can trust in and help each other out. Like, so we had like a little bit of a thought about that.
Amazing, yeah, because that is something fascinating. I sometimes observe that people don't want to share their ideas, right? Because they fear that somebody is taking your idea and ideally make something better out of it. I'm the opposite. I like to share every idea. I like to share everything I know, because if somebody takes it, right, and makes something out of it, makes it a reality, that's the best thing that can happen.
Creates ripples.
Absolutely, yeah. And so sharing ideas creates collaboration, right? It creates trust, and it creates all these important factors that allow an organization, a culture to innovate.
I completely agree with you, and it's amazing to get these insights of you as well, like by creating that safety net, that safety zone. You're currently on your Zukunftsgeist tour, which is a really clever play with Zeitgeist, but in the future. So how does this creating a safety net in uncertain, or a safe space in times of uncertainty, like right now, come together? Like how can we create it? How can we move from a space where we don't really know what's coming in the future, or when we even fearing of the future, into a world view and mindset where this doesn't really happen anymore?
Yes. I think a lot of people think about that question, what will the future bring, right? They're literally searching an answer for that question, what will the future bring? I think it's the wrong question to ask, to be honest, right? Because this is all about predictions, it's all about planning. And for me, the future is not a prediction, it's not about planning, it's what you create, right? So I think a better question to ask is, what future do I want to create? And you have to understand that it starts from within, right? It starts from your imagination. It starts from your desire to create a better world for yourself and for others. And so we on this tour where we really felt that the zeitgeist is that the wind blows pretty heavy, right, for everybody. It's a world that we live in that is defined by chaos, by competition, by a lot of crises, right?
Radical change.
And radical change. And I think that's the zeitgeist that we just experience at the moment. For us, Zukunftsgeist is how we set the sails in that world, right? Because that's something that we can control. If I can set my sails in the right way, right, I can make progress towards a future that I want to live in. And so that's what we found by traveling to 19 cities and meeting literally thousands and thousands of people, where we really wanted to change the way people not talk about each other, but talk with each other. Right? I think we live in a time where a lot of people talk about other people, right? And we wanted to change that and help people to talk with each other, right? Talk about a future that they want to see happening and giving them the right spirit, so to speak, to really own their future, to create the future that they want to see happening. Because the future, again, starts not tomorrow, it starts from within, right? It starts from your own imagination, from your own ideas and how you want to see that future happening.
And about like your own actions. The future is like a sum or a multiplication of the actions of us all, right?
Absolutely.
And I love the analogy with the boat again. I think we're ending up there quite often today, but in a storm or when there's wind, like the sailors of our audience know it. And I was lucky to grow up at the Chiemsee, which is a lake, so I tried it a little as well. You can even sail against the wind, right? It's called Kreuzen in German. I don't know if it's in English crossing, but yeah, if you set the sails in a correct way and position your boat in a correct way, you can sail even against the wind.
Absolutely, yeah. And what we see is that a lot of people just tie their boat even tighter to the dock, right?
Yeah.
And they just stay stuck, right? And some people even think they can fight the wind, right? Which is interesting. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I think the only thing that we can control and influence is how we set the sails, right? And that's something you can learn, you can practice, you can get better at, right? Because then you can eventually, I like the metaphor you're sharing, you can sail against the wind, right? Or you can sail with the wind, right? But you can steer in a direction that you want to go. And I think that's for me Zukunftsgeist, right? It's that inner capacity that you can grow around optimism, around openness, curiosity, experimentation, empathy. For me, those 5 dimensions that really define for me Zukunftsgeist. And that's where we are on a mission to really help people to not predict the future or not plan for the future, but really practice the future, right? Meaning that they practice in how to be more optimistic, how to be more open, curious, how to experiment better, and how to be more empathetic.
Is there some kind of ancient message within there, like Stoicism, which says like don't think about stuff you cannot influence. Focus on the things that you can change and change it for the better for everyone?
I think there's a lot of wisdom in Zukunftsgeist, right?
Yeah. I feel it.
And absolutely, because I think that's really helping people to shape their path forward, right? And there is things that everybody can try, everybody can use. And I learned very early in my life that you don't have to make things more complex, right? It's the opposite. You have to make things more simple so that people start using it, so that people start to really use those things in their daily lives, in their teams, in their organizations to make progress, right?
Yeah.
So not going out and just preach or try to inspire people. I'm really here for moving people, right? By helping them to practice imagination, practice in how to ask a better question, how to experiment, how to have more courage, right? All of those things that I think are now discussed even more in Germany, in the US, in every place, right? We all are looking for that courage that we want to give people, right? We're all looking for a better vision of the future. And I think I have a couple of practices that I can give people to really be able to move in the right direction.
I think you're right. If I understand it correctly, is it also that you're saying, if you ask a person, what do you need? The answer should be nothing, because you have already everything. You just gotta make it work. Just gotta start with what you have. You don't need material things or anything like that. You have everything you had. You have your brain and you have your heart.
Mm.
And from there, your journey begins.
Absolutely, yes. I think that's a very wise way of explaining that, right? I'm not here to change anyone. I'm here to helping them to unleash something that they have already inside. And because you can't change people, right?
Yeah.
It's something impossible. And you should not change people, right? But you should help people to unleash something, to really grow something from within that is helping them to own their future, to shape the future, to create the future that they want to live in.
Amazing. What do you say? What is your perception of Germany as a whole? Do you feel the Zukunftsgeist?
I think we, again, met like thousands and thousands of people on our journey.
Thanks for joining us for the first part of this episode. We hope you enjoyed the discussion so far. If you're ready to keep the conversation going, part 2 is already available right here in the playlist. We appreciate you listening, and we can't wait to have you back for the rest of the story.